You're up there in the hot seat.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go to call this December 19th, 2019 meeting of the AMATS Policy Committee to order. Time is 1:32. We are behind schedule.
We're late.
My fault. Apologies. Could we do a quick roll call? Mr. Pearson.
Present.
Mr. Constance is not present. Mr. Whittleton is not present. Judy?
Present.
And Ms. Heil is not present, but we still have a quorum.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you said Ms. Heil contacted you and let you know she would not be here?
Yeah, I believe I got an email that said she
Okay.
would not be here,
Okay.
so, and I do not believe she's
We can
appointed.
put her in the excused category, not absent.
You can put her on double secret probation if you like.
I will not be doing that to soon.
So, okay. So we have a quorum. Craig, you want to go ahead with the public involvement announcement?
Sure. All AMATS meetings are open to the public, and the public will be invited to comment. If we have a business item or a presentation by staff or consultant, at that time, the committee will be given an opportunity to discuss the matter, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you, Craig. So do we have approval of the agenda?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
You'll have to continue to do this the whole meeting.
I know.
because there's
We're
only
gonna swap them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Switch it out. Do you have any changes?
Mr. Chair, I do have an informational item.
Okay.
We talked about it last week at the TAC. Again, it's an informational item, so by our policy and procedures, we're not posting it because we're not taking action on it. But we have a requested letter of support for a grant that the Anchorage Park Foundation is seeking. So I have copies for you there and copies over there, so we can discuss that.
So informational only.
Just informational.
Not looking for an action.
Nope.
Thank you. All right. Any other objections to adopting the agenda? Okay. Agenda is approved. All right, we've got a couple of meeting minutes for us to consider. We've got the October 31st, 2019 minutes for approval. Do we have a motion on that?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's good you're alternating already.
We are.
Any changes or discussion? Any objections to moving or approving the minutes as stated? Hearing none, the October 31st, 2019 minutes are approved.
Can I make a comment, Mr. Chairman? Good job on the abbreviations of people's names. I like that. It's easier to follow.
The abbreviated names.
They did during, I'm sorry, I'm looking at November 20 minutes. In the questions that were asked, who asked them, it's easier to follow when you have the initials of the asker.
Okay, we're going to do this one more time. We have before us also the member minutes from the November 21st meeting as well. Do we have a motion on that?
I'll move that one.
Second.
Any change or discussion? Any objections to moving the minutes forward? Hearing none. November 21st, 2019 minutes are approved. So we're going to move on into the action items. Action or agenda item 5A, the AMATS 2040 MTP draft conformity determination. Craig, do you want to give some information on that?
I can start. Several people in the room will probably want to chime in. But whenever we do our TIP or our MTP, we always have to make sure that we pass air quality conformity analysis. And that's always the first step. We can't even look at the document if it doesn't conform. So the first step is always approving the air quality conformity determination. We had our usual multi-agency consultation team get together and make sure that it appeared to, in layman's terms, not pollute too much. So Cindy is not here for me to rely on the details, but Matt Stitchick with the health department is here, the municipal health department. So what would you like to add? Because I'm sure I missed some important points.
Just that this update of the conformity analysis uses data through calendar year 2018. That's the latest available certified data from EPA. Like Craig says, we had the conformity interagency consultation with EPA, FHWA, ADOT, DEC, and got concurrence from all the different agencies. So now it's just a matter of having the policy committee approve it and forward it on to FHWA for final approval. Oh, and we basically have no difficulty conformity to EPA air pollution standards, with the exception of PM10 in Eagle River, which we have to watch very closely. That's a maintenance area for PM10.
I'm requesting a public review period for 45 days.
Oh, yes, right. I'm sorry. This, so what we're not requesting is not approval, it's to release it for public review. My mistake.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
then after that, incorporating comments and then submit for approval.
Anything else, Craig, on this item? Sir. Okay, any comments or questions on the committee?
Yes, just a question. Do you coordinate with the State Department of, was it Health and Social Services as well? Are they involved in this at all?
They are not, other than being able to review during the public review period, or if they want to participate in any of the AMATS meetings prior, they can make comments, review at committees.
Thank you.
Any other comments, Mr. Peters? Okay. Any comments from the public in regard to this particular issue? Vivian?
Through the chair, we have, there's a discrepancy on the memo, it was a typo. We originally were going to request a 30-day public review period, but we're actually going to request a 45-day public review period, and the TAC agreed with that.
Okay, so this is going to be a recurring theme throughout this meeting. So I'm going to ask you to rationalize or justify why you need more than 30 days for this review. And it can't just, don't say holidays. I'm not going to buy holidays. It's got to be
No.
something substantive.
It was the Technical Advisory Committee's recommendation that it coincide with the public review timeframe for the 2040 MTP, which is the companion document that this is related to.
Well, that statement implies that there will be a 45-day review for the MTP 2040.
That's
And we have
correct.
not addressed that yet. So why don't we agree for now that the review time will be based upon the review time for the MTP 2040? Will you go with that?
Yes,
You feel comfortable with that?
sure.
Okay, because we're going to get to the review time on the MTP 2040 next,
Yes.
but I don't want to put the cart before the horse, or whatever that metaphor is.
Can I ask a question? Is it possible that the review time for the MTP 2040 will be shorter than 30 days?
No, the public involvement plan requires 30-day minimum, so nothing will be less than 30 days. But there's a lot of discussion that we have to have about requests for additional public review beyond the minimum. And given the tight schedule of the MTP 2040 and the FHWA's concerns, I think there's a discussion to have there
Okay.
about whether or not that's a prudent thing.
And so, final question, if the language, I guess to Vivian or someone else, if the language, if the action requested language is to tie the two deadlines together, the public review deadlines together, is that clear enough? Will something to that effect be clear instead of saying a date certain or a number of days? Is that okay?
I think
Okay.
that would be,
Okay. It won't be less than 30, no matter what.
Yeah.
But if we kind of, like Mr. Schutte said, time together, is that adequate for your purposes?
of course, yes, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Emerson, go ahead.
Just to, Jim Amundson, DOT, just to clarify, at the TAC meeting, there was significant discussion on 30 or 45 days. I think presenting it as the TAC agreed to 45 days is not accurate.
Okay. How would you
I think the
portray it?
TAC left it to the discretion of the policy committee,
That's it.
but there were certainly voices on both sides heard at the TAC meeting on why we should be looking at 30 instead of 45. It was not, let's do 30 or 45. It was, there was most definitely leaving it to the discretion of the policy committee.
Okay. Right, in that regard, it is an advisory committee
Yes.
recommendation. It's not the policy committee actually determines the actual times. Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you. Any other public comments on the issue?
Mr. Chair, sorry. Mr. Amundsen's right. I misspoke. It was, we had some people saying 45 days, some people said 30 days. It's just that staff is requesting 45 days.
So
Understood.
So Mr. Amundsen is correct.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Lori, don't put that in the record.
Thanks, Chris.
Delete.
Okay, any other last minute comments? Okay, what is the will of the committee?
Move to review and release the AMATS 2040 MTP draft air quality conformity determination for a public review period that will conclude. Commensurate with, thank you, good word. That will be commensurate with the 2040 MTP public review period. Is that clear enough, Lori?
Second.
John?
Moved and seconded. Any objections to approving the motion, which would be me?
This gentleman
Acknowledge
had-
his presence before we vote, if he wants to.
He has to take his coat off first.
We're only
I'd
on
like to go ahead and for the
5A.
record state Mr. Weddleton arrived at 1:40, we'll say 2
Sorry, I'm late.
PM. So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded.
We're on 5A,
Hearing
John.
no objections, the motion is approved. So, okay. Moving on to Agenda 5, Item 5B, AMATS 2040 MTP Policy Committee Review Draft. Kurt, will you be presenting that?
It's underway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the, excuse me, for the record, I'm Vivian Underwood of AMATS. And for this item, you have a memo, and you have the draft TAC recommended changes, well, the recommended changes on the draft. And then there was posted to the website the draft document of the 2040 MTP Policy Committee Review Draft. So we had a work session with both committees, the Policy Committee and the TAC Committee on the 5th of December, and we went through the document and we expressed that we would love to have everybody's comments earlier rather than later. And that really Chapter 8 was the chapter that the bodies had not really had much time to review the implementation action items. So I won't read through the whole memo, but we had 94 comments from the planning department when we put it out for agency review draft, and we agreed with most of those. Those changes were made for this draft that you have before you. We did not make changes in response to the TAC comments that you have before you yet. Their meeting ended at like minutes before we had to post the document. That's why we didn't do a comment response summary. But we're going to do most of the, we agree with all of the recommended changes. There are just two that may not get made before the public review draft is released. And one is to recommend setting a time frame for the action items that match up with the Unified Planning Work Program where applicable. And the other one is to add a column to the action items table to match the action item to any associated plan. Those were both made by Ms. McNulty. So we will be making these changes, and our goal is to put the draft out for a 45-day public review period from December 31st to February 14th. And that will be 45 days. The minimum required is 30 days, but the community councils appreciate having a little more time to be able to receive the document, go through it, and meet to pass their resolutions on comments.
So before I let you off the hook
Yes.
in your presentation,
Yes.
I don't think this is the only time we're going to be talking about 45 days here. So for public review purposes.
That's true. We're going to be talking the schedule.
And given the Federal Highways certification review of AMATS and its ability to meet its deadlines for the MTP publication. In our effort to seek efficiencies where we can that are reasonable in meeting that requirement so we don't lose funds into the AMAT, is there a very unique or substantive reason beyond just that the community councils would have liked it or that we're going into Christmas or New Year's or whatever? Are there, I guess, unique circumstances that would necessitate us to seriously consider additional review times, given that we're already very much challenged in producing this MTP in conformance with federal guidelines? So what are the reasons that we would, other than just we would like to, what are the real reasons? I mean, was there substantive changes or something dramatically altered or something extremely controversial that would warrant that additional time?
As a way of answering your question, thanks to Mr. Yanganalen, there is a municipal ordinance. It is in Title II that says that the AMATS Metropolitan Transportation Plan, as opposed to the Municipal Transportation Plan, requires an assembly public hearing. So we need to go to the assembly as part of this AMATS review and approval process. It's also in our intergovernmental operating agreement that the assembly will will have a 45-day period of their own to answer. So we're going to be talking about this in the next item, the next agenda item. But we need to give the assembly plenty of time to take action, to get their 45 days in. And their 45-day period will end on March 13th. If we can get on the agenda, we have to get it introduced on January 28th, which means we have to get it into the PACE system on January 7th. So that's the earliest we can, that's the earliest that we can get it introduced into the assembly. And that is more time than we required for our AMATS public review period. So we are pretty much constrained by that. So there's plenty of time to do the AMATS 45-day public review period. It'll generally coincide with the assembly's 45-day period.
So the critical path is not necessarily AMATS, it's the assembly's timeline?
That is true.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and so we will more than, yes, Mr. Chair.
Just a point of clarification, the 45-day time limit in code is tied to the assembly's approval or adoption of the MTP and that recommendation going back to the policy committee. But it doesn't specify that it must be a 45-day public review period unless I think what you're saying is because we want to overlap those two processes by virtue of that 45-day period laid out in code during which they can get it back to us. That's why you're saying it should be 45 days?
It allows for that period of time, since we have to do the assembly.
In other words, you can't move forward until the assembly has gone through its process.
Exactly.
So whether it's 30 or 45 days you can't move forward without the assembly.
Exactly.
So it doesn't
Cutting
really
the time, it won't, if we should cut it to 30-day public review period, it has no impact on the schedule.
I think this is the next item on here. Is a 45-day critical for this 5B?
5B includes
Oh.
45 days for both of them.
Oh, it says 45 days.
Yes, and
Okay.
we will be talking about that as an next item.
5C and then go back to B then. Because I don't know that 45 days. We had a long discussion on this at the TAC, and I don't know that that 45 days is critical. We have two options, because one pulls the kind of municipal assembly side out, so we can run the AMATs
But
bottom to top, and then have us kind of doing ours independent.
Yeah.
And it gets us 3
Separate.
months more room. We don't go up to the deadline.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give us a
Right.
little buffer here. So we
So
don't,
one of these options gives us that, because we just do the assembly thing totally independent. We don't have to be consecutive with the AMAT.
And just to build off of that, the way that the Title II provision works is it's a shot clock, right? It's a shot clock, a basketball term for how long you're allowed to have the ball.
Oh, I learned something.
And so the 45-day period is just the shot clock for the assembly. Basically, all that says is if you get a long-range transportation plan, you can't just sit on it forever. If you don't act on it in 45 days, we don't care, it goes forward. So the two concepts are independent of each other, I think, is the important distinction.
It is, but Mr. Whittleton, I was going based on, if you choose option 2, that would be the case. If we go with the other option, which we don't recommend, it will take a lot longer to get to the point, we won't even know if we're going to make our deadline by the end of next year, and it will cause extreme stress on everybody. We need to, I agree with Mr. Young, that we need to ensure that we're going to make our deadline.
I'd like to make a motion that we table 5B for a moment and go to 5C, talk about the schedule, then decide if we need 45 days instead of 30.
Okay, would that be more?
Yeah, because we're in 5C right now, our discussion.
Any concerns on that, making that change to the committee?
Did you get that?
Okay, so we're going to
Talking to
table 5B temporarily.
Do you want to do public comment before you
We'll get back to it.
We're not going to make a motion on it yet. We're going to come back to it.
It's not closing the item out.
Yeah, we're just tabling it for now.
Changing the order of the day.
Correct. We're going to table it so we can have the discussion of 5C first. We'll go through that process, then we'll go back to 5B, and that'll inform the process for 5B. Do I hear a second on that motion?
Second.
Second, okay. Okay. So that said, we are going to pause on item agenda 5B, and we're going to move to item agenda 5C, the AMATS 2040 MTP approval schedule. So Craig, why don't you go ahead and jump into that?
Well, we have two options here. Vivian actually can explain it the best, but we had a long discussion about this at the TAC. You have option one, which is kind of they should also be on the iPad, John, but
I want to see them side by side.
you got a paper over there, sure. So option one is kind of the old routine that we have done for years where we go through it and we're trying to get them all done at one time. Option two is more of, let's get our MTP done first and then we'll go back later to the P&Z and the assembly and we would approve what's actually would be the municipal long-range transportation plan. So hoping that they're the same document, but the MTP would be adopted in a quicker manner so that we make sure that we restart the clock and we get rid of our conformity lapse. So
Would it be correct to say that that there would be some folks that would desire that they be developed concurrently and not independent of each other? The LRTP and the MTP 2040?
I don't know if I can answer that
Through
question.
the
So we have
chair,
a-
we did have a meeting with Ms. McNulty, who's the director of the planning department, and we've had several meetings with her, and at first she was really of the opinion that we should do option one, that's the way we've done it in the past. But there are downsides to that, and one of the big downsides is that if we do the AMATS public review period, and then we go through planning and zoning, and then the assembly is actually doing a resolution and adopting a plan that hasn't been finalized yet by the AMATS group, by policy committee. So, and that's exactly the situation that we're in right now. The municipality has adopted a metropolitan transportation plan by ordinance, and the document doesn't exist. They adopted an earlier version, and it went on, the policy committee then went on to make more changes. So for whatever reason, it wasn't taken back through the assembly to make sure that they adopted the correct version. So there is, the version 2 is actually cleaner along those lines. We will get the AMATS document approved first, and this was what Mr. Weddleton asked, that we present this other option too. Get the AMATS one with the federal approval done first. That piece is done. Then we take that document back through Planning and Zoning Commission and through the Assembly. And yes, the Assembly will have seen it twice. That's all right. This is for the municipal version now. And so when the Assembly takes action on it, they don't have to worry that when they give their comments or recommendations to the Policy Committee, that the Policy Committee may or may not pay any attention to their recommendations, and a version of the document will not be approved that the Assembly has not necessarily agreed to. So it's a convoluted, the first one is, and it takes, look at the time, we're down there to the end of November, and we still haven't gone back through the Assembly to make sure they've adopted the version they want. So there's more to this.
Okay. Well, I want to go to committee discussion real quick about this. So thoughts? Mr. Wells?
Yeah, I support this.
Support number 2?
Two, yeah, thank you.
Number 2.
I don't think there's a need for the Assembly's role to put any risk on getting the thing done on time. And this gives us, basically, I think in the January, February, that's just us as an Assembly giving comments towards it, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
yes.
so we get our comments in, and that helps. I mean, one problem would be if we have two different versions, what we adopt into our plan and then what's in AMATS. And this lets us get our thoughts in there, and there will be some. Get them in into the plan. And then I expect when it comes back to us in this second process, 99% of it or more, all of it, we're already good with or willing to accept, so. And I think I think this works, so it's not critical, but you have an intro January 28th. I don't see why not the 14th, because the 28th, you're not really done with your your public comment period anyway, are you?
Well, you are if you go to the 30.
On the 28th, though, if it's intro.
Well, if we
go
put it out
30
on
days.
December 31st, 30 days would be January 30th, and January 28th is before the end of the public review period.
But that's when you're introducing it, so you're basically, before the end of the public hearing, public review period, you're introducing a document that's not quite ready. If you're gonna,
I don't think you can do that, though.
Well, we won't be bringing to the assembly our comment response summary to all the comments that were out for the public review period because it won't be done yet. And I'm not sure that it's required to do that. We just want the assembly's comments on the document at that stage.
So I'm certainly no expert in Title II, but the way I understand Title II is what you bring to the assembly, the LRTP that you bring to the assembly is the done deal, basically. And you're bringing it to the assembly for their adoption by resolution prior to final action by the policy committee.
But keep in mind that this version up here, the top version, is the assembly and planning and zoning would get a look at it as it's within the regular public review.
Right.
When it's brought to the assembly in the Title II requirements, that's the part down at the bottom.
Okay.
So they'll get the version that won't have any more changes.
Two
We'll have-
swipes at it.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. Our two assembly members here will get 3 swipes at it because they'll see it at the policy committee as well.
Mr. Young and all?
So just, Aaron Young and AMATS, just a quick clarification. The ordinance that was passed in 1997 and was later adopted as part of the interagency operating agreement requires it go to the assembly for public hearing, whatever time period you guys determine, and the assembly has to pass a resolution with their recommendations. It's not actually adopting the document at that point. So that's why we felt running the comment period for AMATS concurrent with the assembly public hearing would be okay, and it would help cut down the schedule some. Because if you had to do your public comment period first, then do the assembly, it would kind of delay it a little, or drag it out some.
But that's,
And through the chair, Ms. McNulty is just fine with this as we presented with the breakout, the split schedule.
Any other committee comments?
You're talking, she's okay with number 2?
Yes.
Yes.
The split option.
Or-
no,
Well, I think the question was, do we go 45 days or 30?
yeah. And that's the overarching question on option 1 and 2, though.
Yeah.
It's included.
Yeah.
So let's answer the 5C question first, the 45 days. Again, the question in my mind still is what's driving that? Extenuating circumstances, major changes that the public was unaware of, something like that.
Well, one thing, back to community councils, half of my community councils didn't even meet this month. And so this is probably not even on their radar at this point.
So if we do a 30-day, will they have had an opportunity to meet within the next 30 days, by the end of January?
They'd have a chance to introduce it at one meeting so that they could, do a resolution in favor or against at their next meeting. So it would be sometime in February before most of at least the Northeast Community Council, that's the way they do their business. They introduce it at one meeting, one month, and then they deal with it at the meeting the next month.
And to your earlier point about the overlapping processes and the dates, the 45 days public review period can be shortened, but you don't gain anything by shortening it because it's still out in the assembly's timeline. So that we wouldn't be able to move forward on anything anyway during that interim period. So in this option 2, the 45-day public comment period just more closely aligns with how long it's likely to spend in the legislative process, and all of the timelines and actions will sort of conclude at the same time, which then gives staff roughly a week and a half, I think it is, to turn it around, put it in its final form, and bring back to the policy committee. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, hopefully, if,
Back to the
Yes.
TAC, sorry, back to the TAC and then the policy committee.
And that's kind of reinforced by the community council meeting schedules, if I'm hearing that correctly.
It's supported, yeah, supports that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the community council schedules will fit in with option 2.
Okay.
So that works fine.
And so if we do move forward in this 45 days on these things, with the option 2, which is a time savings for us overall,
yes.
we still have a fairly reasonable expectation of meeting the requirements.
Oh, absolutely. Assembly action is not due until March 10th.
I'll be honest, it feels like we developed a PIP with a 30-day requirement, but over and over and over again, we're defaulting to a 45-day number. And I'm wondering how relevant is a PIP that has a 30-day requirement if we're never able to get there? Whether it's because of community councils, schedules, or assembly actions. I'm just going to note that for the record. I'm not going to get hung up on it. But it does seem to be like we keep bumping it up.
It is
I
what
choose
it
to blame the
is.
assembly.
We can blame, which I'm happy to do. So, but anyway.
Everybody else does.
Yeah.
I blame Jim.
Can I ask a question for Vivian and/or Aaron? So in option 2, the one thing that makes me a little bit nervous about option 2 is because it's out of sequence, not out of sequence, let me rephrase that, because it's concurrent sequences. And so let me ask this, if we get all the way through the top half of option 2 and get to that FHWA review period of May, June, and then right after that are going through PZC and back to the assembly, is it possible that we will have 2 different versions of an MTP out there?
Yes, sir, it is. And that's happened in the
And
past.
why is that a good choice?
Well, actually, when we were talking with Ms. McNulty, she said it may be desirable to have 2 different versions. For specific, maybe there are specific projects. But, the code does say, though, that they should be as closely aligned as possible, as consistent with each other as possible. But the municipality may want a transportation plan that focuses on different road projects than maybe priorities for, I mean, maybe there's another purpose for it besides just the AMATS process. It feeds the CIP and assembly funding. So, and also it helps us, it would help us when we do the MTP, because we would have the municipal's priorities documented in a plan, rather than just going to the CIP and looking at the top 3 priorities of each community council. So then it takes the guesswork out of what the priorities
You
are.
can also have 2 different versions with option 1, because it can go to the assembly for your resolution based on Title II. You make your resolution and recommendations, the assembly does, makes their resolution and recommendations to the policy committee, gets to the policy committee, and they can create a different version or adopt a different version based on some of those recommendations, and you will have 2 different versions still. So that opportunity is there either way.
Yeah, and I think the difference there, the nuance there though, Craig, is that we have a modified version of the same thing. I mean, you can literally have 2 different documents in option 2, which is allowable under Title II, but it does say that to the greatest degree possible, the LRTP, the MOA's LRTP should conform with AMATS, but it's possible it wouldn't.
And we would have great faith in our representatives here to make sure that it gets as,
So he's blaming the assembly again.
Even
I
if
was
we-
giving him credit.
Using as we have been through throughout the process, there's always a disconnect between
Sure.
the 2 documents.
Yeah.
They are in effect living documents.
Yeah.
Continually changing.
It's just it's a risk, so
It is.
that's all I say.
But
It is.
my overarching risk is that I'm precluded from doing any federal funding in the AMATS because we've blown our deadlines.
Right.
That's my concern.
If we take the time to teach the AMATS language to our fellow assembly people, we'll never get this finished. And so,
Yeah.
I tell you a couple of points on that. One is we are planning a AMATS work session in January or something so people understand the process. So the timing is tremendous here.
Sure.
And I think this option 2, having us, the assembly, do comments as really part of the comment response period. Normal AMATS thing will make it less likely that when we finally adopt, we already dealt with our issues here, folded them in, and when we get here, it should be, second time we looked at it, looks the same, we move on. So things like this, we have less likely to have different documents. It looks like if needed, we could bump this up though. I don't think there's any reason to. I mean, you have an introduced at the Assembly January 28th. And if you do it the 14th, I mean, you're still within, you only have two
Not
weeks of
gonna-
public.
they're not gonna-
comments and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, that's too,
Not gonna make
never
it.
mind that.
Through Mr. Chair, Mr. Young and Nillen reminded me that the project public involvement plan, I believe, does say 45 days, that we would put it up for 45 days. So the project public participation plan,
So the PIP has a 40-day, so is there a 40-day requirement or a 45-day requirement, or is it a 30-day requirement? Go ahead.
So, Aaron Youngin with AMATS. So part of our public participation plan, which FHWA has commented is good, that's the plan that oversees all of AMATS for public involvement, sets minimums that we have to have, and that adheres to federal code. So federal code says 30-day minimum. But when the public involvement plan for the MTP was developed, I believe it said 45 days minimum for the draft document to be out. Because at that time, we thought we had a little more time to be able to put this through a rigorous public involvement process. So I would recommend we do 45 days so we don't fall afoul of our public process that we had developed for the plan.
yes, and the only plan that does federally require 45 days is the AMATS public participation plan, not the project participation.
All right. Any other discussion before we go to public comment? Okay. So any comments from the public on this particular issue? Again, it's the AMATS 2040 MTP approval schedule. We have two schedules in play here. Schedule 1, which is a longer one, Schedule 2, which seems to have some benefits to it. James, yes.
Yeah, James Starzik, DOT Planning. I just have one question regarding the March 10th Assembly action due and March 13th Assembly 45-day comment period ends. Is that correct?
Well, if we want to, we would encourage them to take action because that's when the meeting dates are. We are subject to the meeting dates of the assembly. That's the last scheduled assembly meeting that they could do it within their 45 days, unless they want to have a new meeting. So
So
that's,
the 45-day comment period is the Assembly's window, not public comment.
exactly.
Okay, I just
Yeah,
wanted
the
to
AMATS public
understand
comment
that.
closes February 13th.
Right, but there's no public comment through the Assembly? Through the Assembly 45-day period doesn't
Yes,
include any
yes,
public?
and there's going to be a public hearing on February 11th. Yes, the public, as I understand it, the public is welcome to comment at any time during that period.
I think the confusion is that it says in Title II, and it says in our operating agreement, that the Assembly has 45 days to take action.
To take action, correct?
They will have a public hearing within that 45 days, and at that public hearing, the public will be invited to comment. But they just get 45 days to take action. If they don't take action within those 45 days, they have two options. One, they can either ask the policy committee for more time, or they can, well, actually have three actions. They could ask the policy committee for more time, they could decide to make their decision before the end of those 45 days, or they could ask for more time and the policy committee could say, we don't have the time, so we will move along with our MTP absent any information coming from the Assembly. But the 45 days is not a comment period.
It's not a comment
Amount of time
period,
that they have to
per
act on
se.
it.
It's the shot
Okay,
clock.
I just wanted to,
It's the shot clock.
It's the shot clock, not the comment period. I just wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
it's a good clarification.
It's the shot clock. I'll also add that, don't forget, there's 2 public hearings built into this timeline. Not everything requires 2 public hearings.
Any other public comments? Mr. Linnell?
Gentleman to the
Oh, over there, Eugene.
Thank you very much for your assistance.
My name is Eugene Colhaven. I represent myself. I live in the Matthew Valley. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, decision made by the governing body is more like the public interest. First, on the subject that you've got here, and are you having trouble hearing me?
Sorry, there was a conversation.
Then, yeah, with all due respect, can you please listen to the public, because I'm one of the only ones in the public that is here, not some bureaucrat. Okay, and public comment is for the public, not, if you want to do the bureaucrats in this separate section. I'm the public here. Now, I have said this line for a long time, and it does relate to this schedule thing. The more complex and complicated an issue is, the more notice and the more opportunity the public to be heard. Now, frequently I heard in this scenario, the two different days, 45 days and extending it to 60 days. And 45 days, or 30 days, and then having to go and get a permission to get extended to 45 days. Well, one thing I would strongly encourage and resolve is a 60-day, and that would help greatly the scenario. But then, let's talk about notice. If you're gonna go and reach out to the public, even this very meeting we've got here, the city did not do appropriate notice. This is the third meeting I'm on in a row that's occurred. So how are you getting this out? And then walking in this room right over there, there's a document that says you have to share that document right over there. Give me a break. So, you want, and you're having this meeting right now and discussing and taking action on this item and others, is how's the public, this is holiday season, it's all due respect. Things don't settle down until roughly the 8th of January. Then people are back in the window. You're in the window, even the assembly. This is the only assembly meeting that's going to happen right now. And there's no assembly meetings until January. So how can the public be here? This is not the time. And I would strongly encourage you to create, and I also want to stress this thing is, if it's going to the assembly, I would hope that it doesn't go onto the consent agenda. It goes into for a public hearing and to introduce one date and in one meeting and then for later, because I see a lot of stuff that doesn't happen to the assembly for the public, and they approve stuff. And so if this has got to be clear that this is going to the public in an assembly meeting where there's a public hearing, and it should be allowed, because I said the words, the more complex and complicated issue is, because when that happens and you're dealing with these kind of issues, that doesn't mean it should be just one public hearing. Out in the borough, they do too. They see that complexity and they expand in more opportunity. And so that's what I strongly encourage you to do, but you have what we call, in closing, you have defects to this meeting and you're taking action in this meeting, whereas how is the public supposed to be connected? And then for the record, the minutes didn't have a chance for the public to respond, and those minutes reflecting my comments are not accurate. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, just one note, this is it. I appreciate the gentleman in the back pointing my hand. I raised my hand on the first item, and you looked the other way. They tried to get your attention, and I was denied the right to speak. Thank you.
All right. Any other public comments at all? Okay. What is the will of the committee on this action item?
I move that we go with Schedule 2, particularly because it has a minimum of 3 public hearings spread out over the entire year.
Mayor, second.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion for option number 2. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any objections to approving that motion?
No objections.
Hearing none, the motion for option item 2 is approved. So now we're going to drop back to agenda item 5B again. We're going to go back to committee comments. Do we need a refresher on where we are with item 5B? Okay. So again, this goes back to no other comments on 5B at all?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But no comments on no questions on what you're telling us we're at.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's go ahead and continue with
Go ahead.
active 5B.
I just never meet a deadline that I can miss. Sent in as I left the house, some comments on this. None of them are critical for what we're doing today. So if you I just emailed them, but you can put them into your normal comment process in January.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah. there's nothing-
In the public review, public comments? Thank you, Mr. Wellington. Thank you for taking the time to comment.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I have a question along those lines. I too have a list of comments and edits. Some of them I would think I want to get in there before it goes out. So a couple of us listened in at the TAC, heard the great discussion. There's a number of suggested changes and corrections that the TAC forwarded, which look, generally pretty good. And so I guess my question for staff is, if we as a policy committee member have further edits and refinements, should we follow the lead of Mr. Weddleton and just throw them out there in the general morass of public comments, or should we address them here? Because there's two in particular that were hot topics, if you will, at the TAC that I think should be clarified prior to public review.
If there are, Mr. Chair, through the chair, if there are comments if there are changes that you would like to see made before it goes out for public review and comment, we can handle those. It would be good to have you discuss it amongst yourselves and then direct us what you want us to do. And we'll have to think about time. It depends on how much time it would take to make those changes as to whether we can commit to doing it before the public review draft, which we're going to try to get out. Our goal is to get it out on December 31st.
Great, thank you. So I have a couple that I think are relatively easy and won't burden staff in making changes, but they probably will be interesting discussion topics for us.
But we should do that now then.
Great, let's do it then.
I mean, that's,
Okay. The first one is related to Chapter 8, just generically. And I can't remember if this was asked at the TAC or not, but are the goals in any particular order? Because I have suggestions on how to reorder the goals broadly, the headers, in a different order to help emphasize some of the priorities of the MTP a little differently. Is that
The goals are not prioritized. And if it doesn't, does it say that? It should.
It doesn't, but human nature is if you see a list of numbers, you always sort of prioritize it in your head.
It may say in Chapter 3, which is goals and objectives, it may say there that they are not prioritized. Yes.
Okay. I bring that up only because I think, without actually diving into the specifics of the goals, if the goals were reordered in such a way that the preservation was pushed back and made perhaps goal number 3 instead of goal number 1, that would be a little more in line with the overall objective that you articulate so well in the previous chapters of the MTP about some of the other priorities of the MTP. And it just, to me, it seemed like it lined up better with the narrative story that we were talking about.
That brings up a whole discussion about weighting of the goals. And we have not done that in the past. And it has to do with AMAT's commitment towards spending, and that's a policy and procedure. So we tried to stay away from weighting the goals.
In my head, I'm just thinking, I'm a big stickler for if you lay something out in a particular order earlier in the document, that it should line up later in the document. And the way that the narrative works is the narrative talks broadly about a lot of the goals after preservation first. And so it seemed to me that we should mimic that in Chapter 8 as well. So that preservation becomes goal number 3. I forget the title of number 3 right now, but that becomes number 2, and safety becomes number 1. That, to me, that was the way we lay out the narrative in the earlier parts of the MTP. It lines up more
Well,
clearly.
they actually do mirror what's in Chapter 3, the goals.
Are you talking about goal 3, chapter 8,
Yes,
improve travel conditions?
yes. Anyway, I thought that I'll double check that, but I thought that it more clearly lined up with the narrative in the previous
Well,
chapter.
if you see on page 3-3, 3/3, The goals are laid out there with the numbers and what they are. And if we did that, we'd have to go back and redo the whole document. And the table that we have that shows how the goals and objectives match up with the federal planning factors on page 3.8, and matching those up with the MTP goals. We'd have to redo that graphic.
Well, and I think that maybe that's the source of confusion. I understand, I get that the goals, the numbering is the same, but I think based off of that FAST Act planning factors chart, I thought it was suggesting a different order, which is what I was recommending, that our goals line up with that. But maybe that's just purely coincidental the way these are ordered on the FAST Act chart. Is that?
I don't know that the federal is prioritized either, the
Okay.
federal list. And on this table, we do show where the MTP goals line up with the.
That's what I'm looking at, yeah.
Oh.
But if you look, the FAST Act planning factor number one, we'll just say that's number one, support economic vitality. That in our document is goals 4 and 6 instead of goal 1. And so my way of thinking is if we're following this FAST Act organization, we would just mimic it in our organization of the goals. But if you're saying that doesn't matter, then that's fine.
Well, it's also based on, community values as expressed through the comprehensive plan. So we do definitely look at the federal factors, we're required to, but we're also required to look at local community values. So, none of it at this point is prioritized though, either at the federal level or even, at the comprehensive plan doesn't prioritize goals.
Okay.
So, what we could do is think about that for next time, if you would be willing to do that. We'll be starting the next one.
Just expect comments to that effect.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee?
No, she's talking out of it.
Okay, great. All right, any comments from the public?
Just to point out,
Sorry,
general,
your name first, please.
okay, thank you for asking me. Eugene Carhaven of the Nemesis Valley, and I'll be extremely brief. Point number one is, why is when I speak, there's a timer for me, but there's unlimited time for everyone else that's speaking here, and that's not appropriate. But I keep my time to a limited time. I even have a timer myself. And then the second thing is, I see the book being passed around. There's only 2 copies. Two were on the desk that says share, and the end result is one was put there, and then another one was sent over there, and now I'm just handed this. Is this the way to have a meeting when this thing is very difficult for the public to see? Okay, and then just to point out, it says when you all talk, please identify yourself and who you are and what position you hold. You come from state, you may come from feds. You may know each other. For me, I know some of you, but that tape, it's going to be difficult for anyone who listens to that tape to know who is really speaking and where they're coming from. And that's it.
Any other comments? Okay. What is the will of the committee?
Move to release the AMATS 2040 MTP with TAC recommended changes and appendices for a 45-day minimum public review comment period.
Second.
There's a second. Any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. All right. Craig, are there any other action items before we move on?
No, sir.
Okay. Item 6A, the NTP 2040 MTP update. Craig? Anything from you?
Do we have any more besides what we've already talked about?
Just the schedule.
They have that.
Mr. Chair, I am truly horrified that we've missed our deadline for the federal deadline. And I do appreciate your going with option number 2, because I think that's going to help us. That's the most expeditious way to let the Federal Highway Administration know that we're doing everything we can to get this adopted and approved. And we won't have to wait until the end of next year to wonder if we're going to make our deadline or not.
Did we actually generate a corrective action plan that got forwarded back to Federal Highways in regards to how we're going to meet their certification conference?
What we have is what's on the agenda here at Policy Committee's request. They, as you know, didn't actually request it. They thought that that would be good if they had one, but they didn't request it. So, but we have what you have before you as item 7A.
Copy of that?
It's on the.
Okay, so I'm looking at item 7A, and it says we're going to do what we need to do to meet November 20th. Staff will ensure we're compliant, and we will meet the date. That's your corrective action plan?
Well, they asked that we, let them know how we're going to do this. The schedule is basically how we're going to do this.
Oh, okay, so you're going
I
to
will
attach
attach
the
that.
schedule to that?
Yeah.
And that's going to inform them about how you're going to meet the plan, or the requirements. Is that correct?
That's the plan, yeah. And obviously, if we provide that to them and they want a little more information, we will be happy to provide that.
Good. I don't know, we're still on item 6A. Any other comments on the 2040 MTP update?
Thank you.
Any comments from the public on the 2040 MTP update? Okay. We're going to move on to agenda item 7, general information. Craig?
So the certification review responses you have before you on your iPad, there are copies over there. This is, again, the policy committee asked us to come up with a kind of a report on how we're figuring out how we're going to deal with the corrective actions that we received in the certification review. We received 2. One was related to the MTP being completed by November 2020. I won't comment on it seeming odd that we get a corrective action for something in the future, but I just did. But we are obviously, as you know, working hard to get done before that time frame so that we are compliant. And we can start our clock over again and continue utilizing these federal surface transportation funds in the AMATS area. So we are pretty confident that we're going to be able to do that. The second corrective action related to documentation related to the TIP and the MPO's ability to operate and maintain the existing and proposed transportation system. As you know, we can use our federal funds for, or I should say we cannot use our federal funds for operations and maintenance of whatever it is we build. We count on the facility owners to do that sort of thing. So I'm working on tracking down language that other metropolitan planning organizations have used around the country in their tips that kind of reflect the idea that, well, it's not money that we control, but we have great faith in our local facility owners to make sure that we do that. So I found a couple examples. I'm working on getting good language together so we can do that. We have a narrative together, and we just need to marry that last bit of language that will show that we are doing what they have asked in that certification corrective action there. So, but we're just not, I don't have it quite finished yet, so.
Any other questions from the committee? Any comments from the public on this issue? Okay. Any further AMATS general information items at all?
The 7B, I guess, that I added related to this grant request. So the Anchorage Park Foundation is applying for a grant with the Safe Routes to Parks Activating Communities Program. They requested that we provide a letter of support. AMATS provide a letter of support for that grant request. However, they sent that request the day before the Technical Advisory Committee, so it couldn't be on as a business item, and if they didn't provide it as a business item there, we couldn't give a specific proposal to you folks. My knowledge of the grant is limited. I do know that it is a $12,500 grant. I think there are either 6 or 8 available nationwide program, and it's designed to help communities come up with a plan for making safe connections to parks. I'm not 100% sure what that means other than what I just gave you, but again, it's a small grant. They have requested a letter of support. I drafted a letter, they drafted a letter and I modified it somewhat just to see if you wanted me to sign it as a sense of the committee. I mean, we have written letters of support for the Port of Alaska and their grant applications and the public transportation or transit group, the department over there. So it's before you as just your thoughts on it, I guess. The problem being the grant deadline was, I think, 5 days ago. So they were kind of going to go with, well, yeah, that's why I would say short notice. They gave us 2 days.
Well, grants usually come with conditions. So I think it would be prudent to have, whether it's the planning department or the TAC or somebody in AMATS, review the conditions of the grants and make a recommendation and bring it back up through the TAC to the policy committee.
Sure.
To make sure that you're not obligating yourself to conditions that you may have wished you had. So that would be my recommendation. Any other comments from the committee on that?
It's a question. I mean, I think that's actually a good point. I hadn't thought about it all, but if, if we're just saying, yeah, we think they should, I mean, as a city or AMATS, we wouldn't be taking on any liability, but just saying, hey, this is a good goal, and we agree with it.
Well, you'd think that, so.
Yeah, but that's not always-
Free money almost always has
Never free.
grant obligations tied to it. When DNR accepted a $500,000 Land and Water Conservation Fund grant on the Chugach State Park, that overlaid an environmental restriction on the entire Chugach State Park. That we fight to this day to do any projects along the park corridor. So I would just caution you that free money's not free.
It's almost like digging out the quarry there.
Anything. Land and Water Conservation Funds
The
are,
rule of thumb is be careful what you ask for.
I really would, I would just have somebody really go through the grant conditions and make sure you're not obligating yourself to something. That's my.
I can certainly report back to the Park Foundation and give them that request.
Okay, thank you.
They want us to sign on.
All right.
Just, I mean, if I may, at this point, does it matter? The grant application period's closed.
I don't know if, when I told this person that the grant, that, we can't get it on as a business item, she said, well, if you were to get something from them, I could just, forward it along to the application committee later. So,
Well, maybe you can contact them through email and say, hey, we need to run this through a screening review process. We don't get that to you till the end of January. Is that okay?
yep.
And if it's not, then I guess you know the answer. All right. Item 8, I believe we're on to committee comments. Does committee have any comments to add at all today? Okay. Couple DOT items of note. We think the rocks have stopped falling on the Seward Highway for the moment.
So,
Until the next little shaker.
Well, we're actually doing an analysis right now to correlate rockfall activity with the earthquake. And we actually have been able to establish an uptick, notable, in rockfall activity. And we are looking at possibly preparing either applications to FHWA or FEMA to try and get additional funds to help us out on those remediation projects. On top of that, we'll be letting out a contract, I believe it's April, May this year, for a highway safety improvement program funded $20 million rockfall mitigation project. That is one of either 2 or 3 rockfall mitigation projects we have planned. This is the one that we could fund in the near term. That will be executed next year, and then we're also asking for an additional $1 million in targeted rockfall mitigation funds as well.
So are you putting up netting? Is that the plan?
There's a variety of mitigation measures: netting, rock bolting, scaling, where they go down and knock off the stuff that's really loose on the road. Pretty much everything short of blasting.
I see.
The park gets a little nervous when you start bringing out explosives. So, but other than that, we do have active projects in play. We'll be doing enhanced signing over the coming months. You won't just see the sign that says rocks anymore. for that mile 114 to 104, that 10-mile stretch where we have the most active zone. You'll see active rockfall zone next 10 miles. You know, imminent death, you know, stuff like that. So,
It's a real risk.
yeah, so we will do that. And also, when we do get significant weather events like severe warming trends combined with significant rainfall events combined with 100-mile-an-hour winds, and that's where we've typically seen the preponderance of the activity occur. We'll be making sure we put notifications on the board at the south end of Powder Marsh, notifying people. And if we can, provide some notification for the Northtown people that occur as well. We have tried to put up signboards there, but when you get 100-mile-an-hour winds on portable signboards, it never works out well. So, anyway. Also of note, Mr. Van Hoek, can you give us a quick update on the CTP and when that's going to play out? What that is?
Sure. Todd Van Hove, DOT Central Region Planning Chief, through the chair. Planning is just finished submitting all of the area-wide applications for community transportation projects. Our deadline to headquarters. We're going through the headquarters review process right now. And we will be headed down to Juneau 8th of January to score those projects. And results of that score should be posted or readily available shortly after that. And it's anticipated about anywhere between $50 and $60 million worth of new projects that they're going to let into the program.
Thank you. And now that you've sat down, can you give us an update on the new STIP as well?
Sure. Again, Todd Van Hoos, the Region DOT Planning Chief. Through the chair, we are in the new STIP. What is it, 20 through 24 STIP is out for internal review right now. It's actually, our comments were due back to headquarters very shortly. And once they compile those comments, the STIP will be out for public review after they incorporate internal comments. So yeah, the STIP will be out for public review very soon. Anticipated either end of this year, very early, beginning of next year. The CTP projects we just talked about won't be incorporated into the STIP until the First Amendment, which will be preferably or assumably sometime in the first quarter of next year.
Thank you. Okay, any other last comments from the committee? All right, any public comments at all? Sir?
I'll be very brief. Eugene Haveman from AMATS in the Valley. A simple request during the meeting was for people to be recognized before they speak, so that this tape that you have, people will know exactly who you are. You conduct a policy of difference. Some of you are doing it in the audience, but I'm witnessing the committee here failing to be recognized by chairing parties to know who's speaking. And that's where, how can you maintain a record? How can you maintain a record and people, whoever listen to that tape, whatever, to know who's speaking? Many of you know who you all are. I don't know who you all are. I know some of you. The fact is, whoever, John Q, Mary Q, member of the public, listens to that tape at a records request, they're going to have difficulty following with what's going on. And as far as this is the third meeting in a row that I witnessed failure to do proper notice, the basic main location for public notices, from Anchorage Assembly meetings to court commission meetings and so forth, on a special place in the site, on the muni website, and this was not there. You have put it in somewhere else. I'm not saying it's not there on the website, but it's not there where the standard place for public notices. And this is the third meeting in a row that I've addressed this concern. And as far as I'm concerned, you conduct a policy of difference, but what can I expect when over the years the Anchorage Assembly have conducted a policy? And I would encourage you to go to the meeting from 6 to 6:30 Tuesday night on the website, where I appeared before them on the subject of complying with the open meetings law, separate state law, providing reasonable opportunity the public be heard, and on the third law dealing with the charter 17.05. I did that in 2 minutes and 56 seconds in a prepared statement. This is the state of what we have here in this municipality of Anchorage. It's not very good. And I don't see any change in being corrected. And until the public finally says, knows exactly what's going on, and they're outraged, and then those people responsible, we're gonna have to resign. Thank you. With 36 seconds to spare.
Any other comments? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, any objections? Hearing none, the motion approved, adjourned at 2:42.